AARP New Hampshire. We are thanking you for joining our New Hampshire AARP sponsored program with the Creative Feast. My name is Kathy Hoey and I'm your host today as well as a volunteer from AARP. Today's event is part of a monthly series with the Creative Feast focusing on food and its impact on healthy living. Wondering what to make for Sunday dinner? Today, Liz will be showing us Sunday Italian style dinner. AARP has been promoting health and well-being of older adults for over 60 years, and here in New Hampshire, we strive to bring you informative, innovative, and fun virtual events like today's online cook-along demonstration as a means of connection and inclusion. AARP has numerous free healthy living resources on its website. From staying fit to wellness and longevity, information on healthy eating, as well as staying sharp. There's something in there for everyone, and we will put the link in the chat. If you have any questions or comments during this session about AARP New Hampshire, or especially the cooking demonstration, please put them in the chat section, and my fellow volunteer, Francis, will raise them with Liz. Our cooking instructor today is Chef Liz of Hollis, New Hampshire, who built her cooking career in various Boston catering and restaurant venues. She has a very large following of loyal students who enjoy her recipes and her teaching style. After starting her family, she re-entered the food world as a cooking instructor and developed the Liz Barber Creative Feast, which is a wonderful website, which I'm sure she'll share with us. Liz is a regular guest on New Hampshire WMUR Cook's Corner, and her cooking demonstrations and recipes and herb gardens, as well as chickens, have been featured in various publications, including Where Women Cook, New Hampshire Magazine, the New Hampshire Telegraph, and the New Hampshire Hippo Press. All of her programs focus on the premise that we are healthier when we cook at home. We hope you enjoy today's cooking program, and Liz, take it away. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, ladies. Welcome, everybody, to my virtual kitchen here in Hollis, New Hampshire. We're right next to Nashua, right at the top of Massachusetts, right as we head into New Hampshire. So it is a pleasure to be with you all today and to have you here in my kitchen. We have a beautiful sunny day outside, although it's a little bit chilly, but here in New Hampshire, we take it all in. I did some cross-country skiing yesterday and am here ready to cook a nice warm Sunday dinner for you. So I wanted to share, before we get started, I'm going to share the recipe with you. Some of you may be cooking along with me. We're going to kind of jump back and forth between the two recipes. And one thing to note, this ragu takes 2.5 hours to cook on the stove. So you're going to start it now, and then you're going to have it ready in time, in plenty of time for dinner. You can start and, you can do your broccoli rabe with me now and then reheat it at dinner, or you can watch and then do it yourself at dinner. So whatever works for you. But first I want to take you to the website, because sometimes people will come back and it's a great place to find my recipes for today's class, but also all of the recipes from the AARP classes, as well as the recipes from other locations. So if you go to my website at thecreativefeast.com, you're going to find program information about online programming. And then, of course, my events calendar, you can see that. So if I'm doing other classes, you can check out my calendar and register for those. But the big news here is at the food and fun section, where we have my recipe blog. So if you click on that, if you just scroll through, you are going to find a lot of recipes. And for those of you who have been following along with the AARP classes, of course, you're going to find those recipes here as well. You can go into where it says recipe categories and then find a category of a particular recipe and find it there. Or you could even pop in one of the ingredients into the search bar and that recipe will pop up. But I've made it really easy for my AARP friends. So if you click on the recipe blog and go over to the side here. You see AARP 2024 cook along classes. And here you're going to find all of the upcoming classes with all of the upcoming recipes. So of course, if you're looking backwards, you can find those recipes here as well. So here for today's class is the beef ragu recipe along with the broccoli rabe recipe. So those are there for you. And that's pretty much it. There's so much more things though that you could see. You could check out my low carb information. If you're somebody who's interested in intermittent fasting, it's something I've been practicing for years. I do it every day. Keeps me young and healthy. So there's plenty of information there if you'd like. Also, you can go to my, check out my edible gardens. So all of that is here. You can check out my chickens, my edible gardens, and then of course my kitchen remodel that I did about 25 years ago, but that created this wonderful studio. So there's lots of information there. So please do enjoy looking through the website. But right now it's time to get cooking, and my oven is already on. As a bonus, I am going to be doing my oven baked polenta. So I'm going to do that first and get that into the oven. The recipe is linked on the recipe on my website. I'm going to put our chuck roast to the side for now and open up some space here so that we can then get this polenta in the oven. And I chose polenta over pasta because pasta is a really a very high carb side dish. And in fact, you always should treat it as a side dish because of the high carbohydrate content. So I would recommend, if you're going to be cooking pasta, you could cook 1/4 cup or less pasta per serving, and you're going to have plenty. The beauty of my ragu recipe is it's mostly a meat recipe. So it's got all that great protein in there for you, and it can really take dominance over that pasta. But I like to do polenta because the polenta is a whole grain, and all it is just the corn. There's no flour, there's no added, sometimes, you want to be careful about the pastas that you're eating. I like to have this nice and fresh, and it's super easy to do. I think a lot of us are used to the long on the stove stirring the polenta, which is the traditional way to do it, but there is an easier and quicker way to do it. So into my 8x8 pan goes 1 cup of dried cornmeal or polenta cornmeal, and then 4 cups of water. My oven is heated up at 400 degrees. I am going to get myself some foil. Let me just grab that. A little bit of tin foil. And then I do like to pre-season my polenta with a little bit of salt and pepper, so you can give it a little bit of sprinkle of each. Cover that up into your 400-degree oven, and it should take about 25 to 30 minutes. You can pull it out and then finish it with plenty of butter and cheese if you like. That's a wonderful way to finish your polenta. Get it nice and creamy. You could even add a little bit of cream or mascarpone cheese to get it even creamier. So this is going into the oven, and this should be ready in plenty of time for when it's time to take out the ragu and finish that up. So I'm just setting my timer so I know that I have that all set to go. Okay, so that's our extra. Or you could have pasta ready, of course, for your ragu, whichever you like. And even many times, I'll have to tell you, sometimes I just put my ragu into a bowl and eat it without any kind of a starch, and it's fantastic. So you're really going to love this recipe. Now, let's get started with it and talk a little bit about the cut of meat that we're using. Now, this ragu is great because it can go onto the stove and sit there for 2.5 hours. You don't have to do anything to it. You can also do this in your Instant Pot. If you are somebody who uses an Instant Pot, that's perfectly, available to you. I often will do it, and I will cook it in my Instant Pot for about 45 minutes to an hour, and it comes out beautifully. But I like the low, slow cooking method. So I'm going to bring over a cutting board. The chuck roast, rather than using hamburger, okay, a lot of people use their ground beef. The chuck roast has a lot of wonderful fat in it. The other thing I like about this recipe is you can really use any kind of inexpensive cut of meat. So the one, obviously I have one already for you. That one I prepared with a top round roast. So less fat in it, but still not an expensive cut. In fact, it's less expensive than the chuck roast, depending on where you live and what your grocery store charges. This is about $5.99 a pound. The top round was $3.99 a pound, so saved a little bit of money there. But you're not going to really, it's not going to cost you in flavor. Okay, so we have about 2.5 to 3 pounds of a chuck roast, which is what you want to be using. Also, get yourself a paper towel because you do want to dry this off so that when it's searing in our pan or in our Dutch oven, you do get a nice sear on that. So the bottom was just a little bit wet, so I'm going to pop that on there. While I'm talking, I'm going to go ahead over to the stove, and we are going to, let me just turn this down. We're going to go ahead and heat up our Dutch oven. Oh, look, this is left over from when I was baking bread. I forgot to take that out. So I also bake my bread in my Dutch oven. So multiple uses for that Dutch oven. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn that on over medium to high heat for when we are ready to sear our beef. So this just takes a few minutes to do. We do want to brown it because the browning is going to caramelize the fat. It's going to render the fat, so the fat will be released, help to add more flavors to your dish, but more importantly, you're going to caramelize the surface of your meat, and that will add more flavor. Okay, so I just dried this off. Now there is a piece of twine holding these pieces together to make that roast. So just take that off, and you want to make sure that you cut your roast into 4 equal pieces, and that will help this to cook in the 2.5 hour time period to cook evenly, so that when it's done, you are really just shredding this meat with a fork. It's so easy to pull that all together. So I've just cut it into 4 equal pieces. And then I like to keep a mixture of salt and pepper all together. And that way I'm just sprinkling it, on one. Now it's up to you if you're going to use 50-50 salt to pepper. And I always use a kosher salt with freshly ground pepper if you can, or a good quality ground pepper. Or you could do, 1 part salt, 2 parts salt to 1 part pepper, whatever you prefer. But I am going to season my meat, and it really does make a difference to pre-season your meat. That way, every time you take a bite of this dish, it's going to have that wonderful flavor. Now, I have not cut off any of the fat. I want to keep the fat. That is going to help this cook beautifully. It's going to keep it moist. Okay, that's a benefit of having the fat left on your meat, is it's going to keep your meat nice and moist. So why don't I go over to the stove. Now, you want to take some olive oil, a couple tablespoons of olive oil. But this weekend, we made some bacon, and I saved my bacon fat, and in that goes, and that is going to add just another little bit of a rich bottom flavor to this. You don't have to use bacon fat, but when I have it, I like to use it. I would be careful I wouldn't use a maple bacon fat, because that's going to have a lot of sweet in it. Although I suppose that could be okay. If you're going to use a smoked bacon fat to that, then it's going to add a little bit of smoky flavor. So just remember that. But certainly, generally I use olive oil, and that is perfect to begin your searing. So we're just waiting for this pan to get a little bit hot, and I can see that it is getting nice and smoky. So I think we're all set. So I'm going to go ahead, and we're going to put these into our pan. Now, if you want to sear your meat so that it all gets that nice brown crust, you want to make sure that you do not overcrowd your your Dutch oven or your pan or whatever you're cooking in. And you want to make sure that there's plenty of space between each pieces. Otherwise, instead of browning, you're going to end up steaming. Okay, so you don't want to do that. So you do want to make sure that you've got plenty of space between those cuts of meat. Okay, and I'm going to turn on my fan here just to give us a little bit of pull here. And I do have a small fan here. Yep, I was just checking to make sure. This little fan, you can't see it under my camera, but it helps to keep the smoke from blowing onto my camera and actually overheating the camera, which has happened to me a couple of times. So there we have our meat all set and ready to go searing. Okay, so that is the first important step to doing this ragu. So if you ever have a recipe that calls for you to sear your meat first, just understand that it is adding more flavor to your dish, and that's why you don't want to skip that step, okay? All right, now let's talk about the rest of the ingredients that we're going to be using. So we are creating essentially a nice rich tomato sauce or gravy, as you might call it if you're traditional Italian. And so we have our basics, we have our onions, our celery, and our carrot. And they're going to help to build that first layer of flavor. Now, you can cut these in many different ways because they're all going to eventually essentially disappear into the gravy once this is done. So you can take your carrots and you can, on a box grater, shred them if you like. If you're somebody who doesn't want to do that kind of work, you could buy pre-shredded carrots, and that would work for you. But what I did was I had made a salad the other day, and I just thinly sliced my carrots on my garlic slicer. So I had them left over. So that's what I'm going to use. Again, it doesn't matter the shape. It's really going to be adding flavor and will essentially kind of break up and disappear over the 2.5 hours that you're going to be cooking. So you want to have about 1 cup of your shredded carrot, your very thinly sliced carrot. You could do diced carrot if you wanted to. Whatever works for you is fine. The smaller it is, the faster and more complete it will cook. Then the next ingredient is our celery. So I'm going to get that prepared. I'm going to show you how I dice that up. I am going to come over periodically and, oh, look at how beautifully brown that meat is. That is fantastic. And of course, when you have the fat on this meat, that is also going to get that nice searing. So that's, the reason to do that. Now here for my celery, I'm going to slice it into 4 slices. And then I'm going to do this for the bottom part of the celery also. Okay, and so when we do that, then the next step is to cut across, always with a very sharp knife. And now I have slices of celery that are all the same size. They'll cook in the same amount of time and be perfect in this dish, okay? So about a cup, and it's usually, I found it's 1 good size stalk of celery. Okay, so there we have that. Push that off to the side. And then we have our onion. So this is a really great lesson on how to cut your onion. I always try to show this. So basically, you notice that the onion skin is on. We're going to cut the onion from top to bottom, okay? And notice that I'm pinching the blade of my knife with my fingers here, my thumb and my forefinger. And then here, I'm using this second hand to steady the knife as I push down the knife into the onion. And that will make sure that I'm not moving all over the place and that I don't slide off that onion. The other critical step is to make sure always that you have a very sharp knife. It is so important to not only keeping you safe, because then your knife isn't sliding all over the place, but it actually helps with the flavor of the food. If you're slicing rather than mashing your onion, then you aren't breaking up the cells before they get into the pan to cook. So now I've just pulled off my outer skin, and then I'm going to cut off the stem, but I leave the root intact, and that will allow me to do my next step and keep my onion all together. Going back to the stove to turn the meat and check that out. I'm going to lower my heat a little bit. Okay, and then you can do it on, flip your meat up onto the side. Again, that's going to help to add more and more flavor. You can see there's some brown bits at the bottom of the pan. It's going to be delicious. Now here's my stem end over here. I'm going to take my knife, and you always want to have your knife sharpened all the way down to the tip so that you can do this. You see how I am slicing down nice even slices, and then when I cut across, my onion is diced. Okay, very simple to do. I used to teach knife skills classes, and I really like to do this as an exercise. And I always encourage people to do this as often as they can, because these are the types of skills that you learn, and your body begins to, it's like muscle memory. You get more confident with it, and then the next time you do it, you seem to know exactly what to do. And then pretty soon you're going pretty quickly through it. You're doing it more safely. So I always recommend that. Right. And then I flip it down on its side because it's going to be a little bit more sturdy, and then cut through, and then flip it back up so I can get all the way down, right down to the root. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and take this meat out of the Dutch oven, because it's time to get our other ingredients in there and to saute them as well. All right, so we'll just leave this pan right here. We still have our pan is nice and hot, and I'm going to add in my vegetables. So in these will go. All right, and you can lower your heat down to about a medium. Okay, we don't want this to be too high because we don't want to burn these ingredients. Something to note about these wonderful ingredients, all of these have natural sugars in them. And if you've got your pan too hot, those natural sugars are going to burn, and that's how you get that browning. We don't want to do that. Now you can add a little bit more olive oil to it. I'm going to add a little bit more of that bacon fat. Okay, and so I am just going to let these saute. Again, you lower your heat down to medium. Okay, and another thing that you could do to make that go a little bit faster, our goal here is to make these soft and translucent. So as they cook and they soften up, then they're going to release their natural sugars, release their aromatics, and it's really going to add a lot to the flavor of your dish. You can cover this over a medium to medium low heat, and that will essentially steam those vegetables and help to soften them up just a little bit faster. Okay, so that's how you do that. Now, our next ingredient for this is our garlic. Okay, and we want to be generous with our garlic. And you can slice the garlic, you can chop the garlic, you can smash the garlic. I'm just going to give this a little bit of a slice. And then I'm going to add that right in. Okay, 4 to 5 healthy cloves. Now, ladies, do we have any questions at this time?
We actually do have a couple of questions. So,
Okay.
you talked about the Instapot. They want to know if we can make it in a crock pot.
Oh, yes, you can. I don't know what the recipe for that would be. I would assume that you could do a similar recipe to this. Sometimes in the Instant Pot, you would reduce your water by about a half a cup to 3/4 of a cup. I'm not sure on the crock pot, but absolutely, this would be the perfect recipe for a crock pot. And I would do it at the 8-hour time rather than the 4-hour. So definitely you can make that transition into a crock pot.
And someone asked, can you use cornmeal instead of polenta?
Okay, so they're cut a little bit differently. So just so you know, the polenta is going to be a little bit more on the coarse side, which is what you want to use. Could you use cornmeal? Yeah, you could. I mean, it's like if you've ever made grits, right? Grits are a little bit finer than the polenta cut. The cornmeal is just going to come out. It's going to come out more like they used to call it like a cornmeal mush. It'll be much finer in texture. The beautiful thing about the polenta is it does have a little bit more of a rich texture to it. So I absolutely recommend this. What I don't recommend is that you go out and buy the pre-made polenta. You've seen it by your deli section. It comes in a tube. Don't do that because they've added some preservatives and it's just not worth it when you can see how simple that is to make. I mean, that's literally it. It's in the oven for half an hour and I'm done. And then there are so many different uses for it. So, but thank you. That's an excellent question.
And how long can you keep your bacon grease in the refrigerator?
Oh boy, I think that's a pretty as long as you keep it fresh and you keep it airtight. I don't see fat is used as a way to preserve food. Oftentimes you may see a pate in a glass jar and they've layered fat on top because it seals out the oxygen. And that fat is still good for quite a long time. So as long as you keep it in your refrigerator nice and cold, I think that it's pretty much, there's no time limit on that.
And one last thing, everybody wants to say thank you for the knife skills with how to cut an onion. And a lot of people said they've seen you before and like the way you've taught them to chop like that.
Good. Well, I'm so happy. It's always nice to know that, that people are taking these lessons and they're applying them to their cooking habits, because you'll just get better the more you do it. And so convenience, pre-cut foods, they're very convenient, but if you're somebody who hates cooking, and there are many of people who just don't like the task, buying the pre-cut is probably a good idea for you. Or if you're at a stage where maybe you have arthritis and it's a real struggle for you to cut, you should definitely, buy those pre-cut. Just look at the ingredients, even though it looks like, how could there be anything in this? A lot of prepackaged food manufacturers or processors, they spray on it some type or add in some type of a preservative that you really don't want. So you want to just be very aware of that. Okay, now we have our other ingredients here. So these are our seasonings and of course our liquids. So what I have here is we have whole plum tomatoes, okay? And you want those because you're gonna get that meaty texture that you need for this sauce. We also have tomato paste and 3 tablespoons of that. And then we have, now if the recipe calls for, sprigs of thyme, but you can certainly use dried thyme. I have about a teaspoon of dried thyme. This is from my own garden. And then, 3 wonderful bay leaves. They're going to add a nice deep flavor to this. So you do want to put your bay leaves in. And then I have 1 cup of a nice rich red wine, and then 1.5 cups of water. Now, if you don't have wine in the house, don't worry about it. Just use the water. You could use broth to give you better flavor, richer flavor. You could use like a beef broth to this, or chicken broth. That would be fine. I didn't have those, so I'm just using water, and then I'll just add in more seasoning to it later. So let's go back over to the stove and check out our veggies. Okay, and you can see all of that steam coming off of them. And they are perfect and ready for our next step. Okay, so now it's time to add in those wet ingredients. So in go our plum tomatoes. And there's no need to break them up now because they will be broken up throughout the cooking, and then at the end you can break them up. Now, I never let a tomato can with any tomato go to waste. So in goes my water into the can, and then I got a nice clean can. So I've used all of that tomato. And then we have our red wine. And that's gonna go in. And my tomato paste. Now, for those of you who are just using a little bit of tomato paste at a time, I love the tubes of tomato paste because they stay, in my refrigerator. I don't forget them, right? When you open up a can of tomato paste, every recipe says, oh, just use 2 tablespoons of this tomato paste. Well, what are you going to do with the remaining 4 tablespoons? And we all have the greatest intentions of freezing that in little ice cubes. They can use it later, and then we never do. So I keep a tube of tomato paste in my refrigerator if I need 1 or 2 tablespoons of the tomato paste. But today, since I've doubled my recipe, because I've made a recipe of this morning, I used the whole can. So I went ahead and used the can. All right. So in goes our aromatic. All right. And notice I didn't add salt and pepper because my meat has been seasoned, right? So in goes our meat, and plop it right in there. Remember, we've got these cut into those 4 equal pieces. Now, I must confess, I have also made this with pork, which is really nice. So you can use beef or pork. The beef does add, I think, a lot more flavor. But if it's a cost thing for you, you should by all means go ahead and use pork. I serve that to our local seniors once a month. My friends and I make lunch for our Hollis seniors group. So we have between 30 and 40 people who come. And so I made the beef ragu, but in order to cut back on cost a little bit, I did half beef and half pork, and people loved it. And, it was just as flavorful, but that's a great way to cut down on the cost a little bit. Okay, so now the pan is on the stove, and what we're doing is we are bringing this up to a simmer. As soon as it hits a nice simmer, then we're going to drop it down. Well, I should say a boil. Drop it down to a simmer, cover it, and then it's going to go on the stove for that 2.5 hours. Okay, so let me just move things around here. And ladies, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to throw those in.
Okay, I actually do have a couple of questions. You mentioned beef and pork, but could you do this with chicken as well? And if so, what kind of chicken would you use?
So that's a good question. Now, the reason that beef and pork do well, and the cuts you want to use are cuts that are tough, have a lot of fat in them, and normally take a lot of time to cook. So chicken would not be the ideal for this because you wouldn't develop enough flavor from your ingredients in the short amount of time that you would be cooking a chicken. The problem with chicken is because they bred our chickens that you buy at the grocery store with so little fat, you can overcook meat so that all of the fat is drawn out and then it dries out the meat. So I would recommend for you, if you were going to do this, is maybe one way you could do it is sear. First of all, use chicken thighs, leave the skin on. And I would do the chicken thigh with the leg attached because then you're going to get more collagen from that as well. Sear those off, put those to the side. Do your sauce and let your sauce cook alone for about an hour to an hour and a half. Then add your chicken pieces that you already seared into that and let them cook in the last hour with your sauce. I think that would be a good solution for you if you were going to use chicken. Because again, cooking chicken for 2.5 hours, it's just going to dry it all out. That's my opinion. So, okay. You can see that this is bubbling beautifully. So now is the time to go ahead and take this. I'm going to move it off of the main part of my stove. I'm going to cover it and then begin that 2.5 hour cooking time over a low flame, right? Because we're going to simmer this. So that's going to be over a low flame. Okay, ladies, I can take some more questions. I'm just moving things around on my stove here. So if you have any more questions, throw them at me.
If you're using pork, what cut of pork would you use?
So I used pork roast, but again, left all the fat on it. You could also use pork shoulder, which will also have a lot of fat on it. So that fat is going to be the key to getting a really nice moist pork finish. Okay.
And
So
one
that's what
more
I would
question.
do.
One
Yeah.
more question. So when you were talking about the liquid to put in this, you had the cup of wine and the water, and you had said you could use, you know, stock or something. So total, did you want to have just total 2.5 cups?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And the
that's
wine
last one.
again is, yeah, the wine is going to add a little bit of flavor to it, of course. The richer the wine, the more, you know, flavor you're going to get from it. Did I answer?
Yes, and that's the last
Okay.
question for now, but I'm sure there'll be more.
Okay. All right, great. So now we're going to do the broccoli rabe. Okay, so for many of us, this is a new recipe or a new vegetable for us. And, you know, it's called broccoli rabe, but it's not the broccoli that we're familiar with. The broccoli we're familiar with, of course, doesn't have the leaves attached. And it's much milder in flavor. I got to tell you, I am disappointed in this broccoli rabe because you see, this is the part of the broccoli rabe that you recognize, right? Let me just hold it over here. It's got that little broccoli floret. They're really tiny. So what I have here, we have a very sturdy stem, okay? And it needs time to cook. The other thing about broccoli rabe and other bitter greens is that they are bitter. So bitter greens, what do I mean by that? That can be broccoli rabe, endive is a bitter green. Kale, I think, is considered a bitter green for many people. These greens, they need cooking time in order to remove that bitterness. And once that happens, they actually begin to start to sweeten up. So, let's see, Swiss chard is another one I like to cook up a little bit or steam it first before I saute it. So that's what we're going to be doing essentially, is to steam this first before sauteing. And I'm going to leave it whole. You can, if you want, cut off the bottom. So I think I might do that just to give them, you know, get rid of this this bottom cut that they arrived with. So I'll just cut that off. But you do want to leave those leaves. And I have a pot of boiling water that has been heavily salted. Now you're going to say to me, oh, Liz, I'm watching my salt. Well, that's of course very important to do, but I want you to understand what salt does in your vegetable cooking. So does it add flavor? Yes, it does. But importantly for your vegetables that you're serving, it actually helps them to retain their brighter green color. So you'll see recipes where they want you to blanch your vegetables in salted water, not just a teaspoon. If you add more salt to it so that when you taste the water, it should taste like the sea, then you have reached the right amount of salt in there, and that will help you to retain that beautiful bright green color. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this into my salted water. All right. And then I'm going to remove my polenta from the oven. All right. And so I'm going to open this up so that the steam is away from me and hopefully away from my camera. And then drop that in. And we're going to let this simmer for about 3 minutes. That's going to help cut that initial bitterness. So put that on for 3 minutes. Now I'm going to take out my polenta. So let's take a look at that. Been in for about a half an hour. All right, and bring that over here. And I want you to see what it looks like. Okay, at half an hour. All right, and oh, see, now it started to thicken up beautifully, and you could pop that back into the oven and continue to cook it for another 5 to 10 minutes or so. But you see how beautifully soft that is. So I think I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna let it cook for another few minutes, and then we'll take that out. And then it's just a question of putting in a nice pat of butter, some Parmesan cheese. And like I said, if you have some mascarpone cheese, that'll make it real creamy. Or some people might add a little bit of heavy cream if you like, and that will make it creamy as well. You could also, instead of water, you could use chicken stock, vegetable stock, beef, I wouldn't use beef stock, but chicken stock or vegetable stock if you wanted to. It's just up to you. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get my garlic ready for this recipe. So this calls for sliced garlic. So we're gonna go ahead and slice that up. This is for the broccoli rabe. Simple ingredients, right? We've got garlic, olive oil, a little bit of crushed red pepper, and that's it. And this is going to be a really delicious vegetable for you. And then while this is going to go into a saute pan, while it's doing that, and I'll stir it every once in a while for 10 to 20 minutes, depending on how soft you like it and how mild in flavor you like it. While that's happening, I'm going to take my ragu that I made this morning, and we're going to break that apart, and we're going to finish the ragu so you can see what it's like finished. And we're coming up on 10 minutes left in the class, and I think we're going to make it. So let me give this a little bit of a dunk into our saute pan. I'm over a medium heat, not too high, but a little bit of water in there. I just want to get that out. Over a medium heat, I'm going to add some olive oil. Now I do this while the pan is cold, because then I won't burn my garlic, because I have every bit of control over how hot the pan is. If you take your garlic and you put it in a hot pan, chances are you're going to burn that. So you want to keep that, be very careful of that. I'm just going to add a few more minutes for our polenta. And so I'm just going to let that garlic saute up. And as soon as that's sauteed up, I'm going to then take my broccoli rabe out of that salted water and put it right into that pan with the sauteed garlic. And then we're going to let it cook until the end of class, and then we'll serve that. Now, let's see how I did with my earlier preparation of the ragu. I'm just going to take a towel and put it on here. Sometimes the pan is a little hot and leaves marks on my cutting board. We don't want to do that. Okay, so I'm just putting it out of the camera's view, because if it's too hot, it will heat up the lens on my camera. So I'm just gonna move that off to the side. Okay, and open that up and release that steam. And get myself a couple of forks. This is how easy this is. Now remember, this is 2.5 hours later. And let me make some room here on our board, so we can all get a nice view of that. This is an extra cutting board I love to have to cut meat on it. It's got that wonderful channel on the side. This is made by Epicurean, which is a really great brand of cutting boards. Okay, and we're going to take these out. So this is my top round, and that's been cooking in there for about 2.5 hours. And then we just take our, oh, look at that. Don't you love it when it comes out? Even I love it when it comes out just right. Always makes me a little nervous. I am going to move this a little bit out of the camera's view, off to the side again, just so it's not going to get right into my camera because it will shut my camera off and I don't want you to miss the thing. So look at how beautiful that is. And this is the top round, a lesser cut. I browned it, left the fat on, leave that fat. Don't be tempted. This fat is good for you. This fat will give you satisfaction. We all need fat. Our brains need fat, right? So we want to really eat good quality fats rather than manufactured fats. So what does that mean? Well, you want to stay away from canola oil, seed oils that have been highly processed. Olive oil is fine because it's barely processed in comparison to your other seed oils, your canola oil, your vegetable oil. Stay away from those. There's no vegetables in vegetable oil, by the way. So you do want to keep that in mind, right? That's why I love to use the bacon fat. I like to use really good chicken fat. I have my own chickens, and occasionally I've had to, slaughter a couple. So I do keep that chicken fat, or I buy it from a local farm, and the chicken fat is just fantastic. So now this one's being a little tough for me. This one's not cooperating, so I might just add this to my other pan and let it cook just a little bit longer. Oh, there we go. Maybe I was just being impatient, but look at how beautifully that comes apart. All right, let me just go check on our garlic. All right, and this looks great. This looks like it's browned up a bit. It's time to go ahead and add our broccoli rabe for that finishing touch. All right, I'm going to take the broccoli rabe right out of the water, because that water is going to add a little bit of water to this to help it steam and cook for a little bit longer period of time without burning. I'm going to go ahead and remove my pot here. I'm actually saving this water. This water I either will cook other vegetables in, or I'll give it to my chickens as an extra boost for their nutrients. They'll love to drink that, and then they get all of that wonderful those nutrients in their eggs. Okay, so almost done here. I think I'm going to give up on this one just because I don't want to waste any more time. I'm going to take this and pop it into my other container with my other meat, and it'll just cook up beautifully. Now, let's see what this does. If you take our, oh, that's our polenta. So I'm just going to turn this off, pull that out, and let that sit. And the longer this sits, the polenta sits, the more it will firm up. Okay, so there's our polenta. And of course, I'm a butter girl. So in goes our butter, and I'm gonna grab some cheese. And I like to keep always have some grated cheese on hand. Add a nice handful or two and let that sit there. All right, maybe what I'll do is just move this off to the side just so we have more room, and then I'll bring it back out. Okay, so now we want to take this. Now remember, our tomatoes are still a little bit on the whole side. So you want to take, if you have a masher or something like that, or you could take your immersion blender. What happens to my potato masher? So I'm going to take my immersion blender and give this a little bit of a whirl, and that will help to break up the tomato, which is the whole plum tomato, and give it a little bit more sauciness. Immersion blender is one of the greatest tools ever invented for the home cook. Oh, by the way, you do want to take out your bay leaves so they don't get chopped up. Let's see if I can find them. Maybe I already zapped them. Oh, there's one. That's number 2. The bay leaf search. And there's number 3. Good, now we can carry on. All right, I'm lowering down my broccoli. Okay, so what we've just done now is we have thickened this up, right? Because we have ground up those tomatoes. You could, like I said, you can mash them up, and then in goes our beef. A lot. Oh, so good. So good. You are going to really adore this. Nobody at your house is going to be complaining about this, I promise. Okay, so there's our ragu. And of course, you always want to give it a little bit of a taste to make sure that it's been seasoned enough. Now, I wanted to check, I forgot to put in a little bit of crushed red pepper in my broccoli rabe. So I like it. You can use just a little bit if you want. I always recommend it. And look at how gorgeous that is. Really beautiful. You see how it kept that green. Okay. Lower that heat down just a little bit more. It kept that beautiful green color, which is what we were hoping for. All right. Now, let's do our ragu. So we're going to get our polenta, which is perfect. So that thickened up just a little bit more. And if you don't eat all of your polenta, the next day you can use it. You can heat up a pan, heat up a little bit of butter or olive oil, and you can fry your polenta and then serve it with eggs or serve it with your meal that evening or for lunch. But look at how gorgeous that is. Perfect. And again, you really had to do nothing to it, and you have this wonderful whole grain addition. So I'm going to put my polenta on the side here. So this is going to be my lunch. I have been fasting since yesterday, last night at 6 o'clock. So believe me, I am ready. I'm not overly hungry, but making all of this food really gets me excited. So let's do a little bit of parsley in here. And that's going to add wonderful fresh flavor and some wonderful color to this. Okay, and give that a little bit of a chop. And you can add it right to your ragu, or you can use it to garnish your plate. And we're going to plate this up. Ladies, I have a few more minutes while I plate this. Were there any other questions before we finish this up and say goodbye to each other?
There was a question about avocado oil instead of olive oil.
Yep. So avocado oil is another one of those low processed oils that are fine to use. Make sure you're using a good quality, and you should be fine because it's much less processed than a vegetable oil or a canola oil. So, okay, there is our ragu. Add some parsley to that, and then I'm going to add it to the rest here that we have. Oh, and yes, I do add a lot of parsley. I just love it. It's a fresh herb that really lifts the flavor of any dish that you're using it in. So I do love to use a lot. I always used to say, I don't know what a teaspoon looks like, but I know what a small handful looks like. So, all right. So there's our ragu. And I'm going to pretend that we've cooked our broccoli rabe long enough so that you can all see how beautiful that is. And it really is such a great idea to introduce new vegetables to your routine, because then you're going to have a lot of different flavors. You're going to re-excite yourself about eating vegetables when you try something new. So that's why I like to add them. And then, oh, there's my tongs. Toss this together. Okay. And remember, we use the salted water, so you really shouldn't need to add much more salt, but you can certainly season this up with a little bit of salt and pepper. The other thing, which would be really nice on this, is to use some lemon juice or lemon zest, and that would be fantastic. So this is about 1 to 1.5 pounds of broccoli rabe. Like any of these greens that you saute, they're going to shrink down. So this would be enough for the two of us because we are big vegetable eaters. So you're going to play with that. But here you have your wonderful Sunday ragu, either with pasta or how we did it here with polenta, and then we have a beautiful broccoli rabe. So we are all finished with our cooking demonstration for today. Ladies, do we have any other questions before we say goodbye?
Someone wanted to know, can you use basil in the ragu?
Oh yes, yeah. Don't be shy about trying different herbs. Rosemary would be really great. A little bit of sage would be nice. So yeah, absolutely.
And one other question, some people were wondering if you have the 2023 recipes, if there's any way to get to those that you did for AARP, because they can see your 2024s.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll bring that page back up underneath the 2024. I'll do that as soon as we get off camera, and then
Okay.
I'll upload it, and then you'll have it right away.
Thank you very much, Liz.
So I want to thank you, Liz, for this wonderful
Thank you.
cook-along demonstration. And the dishes look wonderful. Everybody says that on the chat. They're really hungry, and we always learn a lot, and people have been saying that as well. Today's cook-along demonstration is one of the many upcoming virtual event offerings through AARP. To learn all about AARP New Hampshire's virtual offerings, including coffee and conversations, gentle yoga, educational webinars, and more cooking demonstrations, please visit us at our website, www.aarp.org/New Hampshire. And especially if you are interested in volunteering for our New Hampshire AARP community teams. We hope you join us for our next cook-along demonstration with Liz on March 19th at 2 p.m. And Liz will demonstrate an Easter dinner. Registration for this cook-along demonstration is also on the AARP New Hampshire website. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much, Liz.
Thank you, everybody.